Hello, everyone. So we have Holly is our focus here, but we've decided that it would be more fun, and hopefully more fun for you, if we sort of had a fireside chat about our lives as directors. So we're going to show you a couple of clips, and we're going to chat with each other, and we're going to open it up to the floor. I'd like to start by telling you about how we met, because our lives sort of we're at the same point at one point, and then we've both gone on our journeys, and now we're kind of converging again. We met, when we met, I was still a documentary filmmaker, and Holly had just made P4W, which was about a women's prison. I had just finished doing several documentaries at the National Film Board of Canada, and I was moving into drama. I was doing a feature film, developing a feature film called Bordertown Cafe, and Holly was trying to get off the ground another feature.
Mary Kills People. My Father's House, Sylvia Fraser's book.
Right. So both of us had decided that we wanted to move into drama rather than documentary. The reason I wanted to move into documentary or drama was because I felt that it was difficult to make documentaries, and I felt that I was always trying to tell a story with a documentary, and kind of felt that I was exploiting people so that I could do what I wanted to do, which was tell a story and say something about life. And I felt that it would be better just to move into fiction and do it that way. And it was more honest to do that. And so Bordertown Cafe was my first journey into that. And I think, I'm not sure why you decided to go into drama.
Well, I always wanted to do drama. I always wanted to tell stories. But back when we started, women just didn't do drama. They didn't get the jobs. I mean, things have changed a lot. And it seems for women that are making films now not as difficult. But at the time we did it, we'd go on a film set and it'd be, you're the only woman we've ever had direct a show. So I wouldn't like to say ghetto, but I was kind of ghettoized in documentaries, but it was a blessing in disguise because I ended up really learning about human nature and people in real situations. One of my favorite documentaries I made right here in Vancouver, Hookers on Davie, in 1985, and it was when all the prostitutes were on Davie Street. And through that experience, when I finally did get to do drama, I really understood how to approach an actor and work with an actor, because I was dealing with a lot of very sensitive people that if you say the wrong thing, you're in trouble. So I had to really learn to be cautious and gain trust, which is also the same thing you need to do with actors. So even though documentary wasn't my first intention, it ended up being the best groundwork for what I ended up doing.
So I think we'll show the first clip of Holly's, which is from Mary Kills People. And both of us, Holly did the first season entirely of Mary Kills People and established the look for it. And I came on the second season, and I also did the third season. So I'm interested in how you approach, let's talk about the difference between something that you're setting the absolute tone for and then coming on to a show that's already been set.
Sure. Mary Kills People is about life and death, and it's about living with dignity and dying with dignity and having the right to do that. And Mary, has anybody seen it? Oh, great. Oh, good. There's more than one. Mary is the angel of death and the nurturer of life. So in approaching that and trying to think of a visual concept that would service the story and the characters, I came upon the idea of water as a metaphor, because without water, there is no life, and it's essential to life. So we surrounded her in water. We had her home was on water. It looked like she was on an island. Everywhere she was water, and she was on the land, and it was the water would get closer and closer to her throughout the story. We also used in the color palette for her, everything was blue tones. Her home was cooler and blue, while the other people, the living people, were more earth tones. So everything we did really came from the camera angles to the composition to the locations, was all servicing the story and the characters. Of course, when, television is a lot different than when you make a movie. With television, you have to now convince the networks this is what you want to do and this is what you're going to do. And it is some convincing, because we put her on water and they thought, oh, her home looks too grand for her character. But in fact, her home really looked very true to her character. You used a lot of her home as well, too, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was a really good location for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also used a one-point perspective like Kubrick in terms of a lot of tunnels, so that we had the feeling, when you die, you walk down that long tunnel. And we used flares like the Eye of God. So we were kind of just surrounding the entire piece with imagery that relates to life and death.
And so you would have to work very closely with your cinematographer to develop all those themes.
Yes, the cinematographer and the production designer. We went through tear sheets of paintings, and we went through a lot of video clips, and we brought, the best way to put a show together is to use a lot of references, and you're all on the same page. So we worked for at least 8 weeks developing the whole look.
Mm-hmm. So then when I come on in the second year, that look has already been established. And then it's my job to use those same themes, but to try at the same time, as you always do on any television series, that you I always say it's like jumping onto a fast-moving train. You can't disrupt the look of the show. You can't disrupt the characters. You have to somehow work within those confines, but at the same time feel like you're actually giving something to the show and to yourself, that that you still can, within that box, that confinement, you can still be creative. And that I find that's a challenge.
It is, but at the same time, a lot of it is, I think, to do with your producers. Like Tassie and Amy Cameron, who were the executive producers on this show, were very in keeping with the tone and the look of the show. They even had me talk to the cinematographer, because I could not do the next season, about the look of the show. And the designer, and all of us sat down and went through everything. But then another show I was on, Be an Erica, where I did the pilot, I didn't even recognize it the second season, because they wanted a different tone, and I had used a whole tone of blues and coolness and steel and this stuff, and I went back to shoot an episode the second season. It was all brown and warm and an entirely different look. So really, I think keeping that look has a lot to do with the producers really having the vision that you had when you originally created it. In this case, they did. But you still brought a lot to it, and I think that's the skill, and why you get called back as a director on these, what you could call cookie cutter in a way, shows, is because you take them out of the cookie cutter. You keep the formula, but you bring something they haven't had before.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, it's getting harder and harder to do that these days. I'm sure Holly feels the same way. There's much more control over you now on many shows, where the creators, the showrunners, the writers are sitting beside you, effectively kind of co-directing, like saying, I want another take, I want the actor to do this instead. It's becoming more and more frustrating, I have to say, and I'm less and less interested in doing series television because of it. And I'm becoming very selective about the shows that I do.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's one reason why I like doing pilots, because they need a voice, so you get to bring the voice to them. But certainly, especially American shows, it's funny, because shows like Dexter's and Americans, they were never on set. The producers, the writers were not on set. They trusted you. It was a whole different animal.
And that's why it was such an interesting show.
Yeah. But then you get into a show like a Dick Wolf production, and you have the writer of the script there reading the lines as the actors are talking, not even looking at the action, just making sure the word is word for word. So it does become frustrating. But there, like everything, and I do about, and I imagine you do too, about 10 shows a year, and I would say there's one good one or two good ones. But the nice thing that happens, even if the shows aren't great, is directing is what we want to do, and that's what we are.
Yeah, but I don't want to direct that like that anymore. It's just
Yeah.
it's not interesting to me. But I'm also at a point in my life where I don't have to direct as I don't want to do it as much anymore. I just want to be selective. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Yes.
Hello. What's the prep time when you're working on a series, and what is the relationship and time that you get to spend with the producing directors? Because isn't the producing director's job to kind of maintain the look and feel of the show? Do you get a lot of time with them and during the prep?
Well, right now I'm the producer director on Batwoman, and what I tend to do, I came in on the third episode because I was finishing a pilot in Montreal. But what I tend to do is I sit down with the directors. I think there's two types of producer directors. They're the ones that are very generous. They sit down, they tell you all the points that are going to hurt you if you talk to this actor this way or you do this, and this DP, don't really trust him because he's really working for producer and he wants to direct. And there's that kind of PD. And then there's the PD that's saying to themselves, oh, they're going to take my job. Oh, they're going to look better than me. Oh, their show's going to be better than me. And they kind of guide you the other way. And I've come across those guys where they will lead you right into the lion's den. So you have to, just like anything in this business, and I'm sure Norma agrees, is it's all about trust, working with actors, working with everybody, but at the same time you have to be very cautious because you can't really trust everybody.
And you always get the same amount of prep time as you do shooting time. So if it's a 9-day shoot, you get 9 days of prep. And so you kind of get to very quickly know people and know what's going on in the politics. And you have to really sort of sit back a little bit and watch because of you don't know whose loyalty. I mean, it's terrible to say this, but you don't know what the loyalties are. You don't know who to confide in. You can't really trust anybody.
No, and they're called assistant directors.
Terrible to say.
They're called assistant directors, and some of them are just wonderful, but they do work for the producer at the end of the day. And people who encourage you and champion you, if you're about to go an hour over, they suddenly seem like a little bit of a different person.
Yeah, yeah. Because really, the assistant director is really an assistant to the producer. They want you to get finished on time. But the best ones are on your side and manage to find a way to ride that line so that you feel that they have your back, and they do have your back. But at the same time, they've got all this, coming down on them. They've got a lot of weight on their shoulders. So that is a very difficult job.
And ultimately, a lot of them want to direct, so you also have to be cautious with them too. It's a funny line, and it's changed for women now, I imagine, more than before. But I remember women work, I believe, differently than men in the sense that women collaborate more, they nurture more, they solicit more opinions. And at the same time, you have to be very careful because when I first started doing that, I had to put people at bay because all of a sudden everybody wanted to take over and direct for you. So that's another politic I think you have to be careful.
So what would be the most important fights to fight, if you were choosing? Like drop that, but what's most important when you're going into a series?
That's a good question. I mean, there's what's important every day because it's coming at you all the time. And in terms of surviving, you really do have to train yourself to only use your energy where it's necessary. And the necessary energy is no one can do their job until you make a decision. So until you make a decision about locations, until you make the art department can't start working. The locations people, they can't figure out where to put everything comes from your decision making. Mm-hmm. So if you realize that all you have to do really is make decisions and not get involved in other stuff, then you're actually doing your job really well.
Yeah, and everybody, especially the best part about doing series, if you're just a guest director, is going back a second or third time because you've gone through all that stuff.
It's so great.
But in the beginning, I'm very fussy about locations. I'm probably most fussy about that more than anything because I think if you have a good visual location, it's really will make or break your story. So if I go on a new show and I'm a little, not yet, let's see more, I could feel everybody wondering, is she going to make a decision? And it's a fine line because you don't want to make a decision quick and make the wrong one. Because I've made that mistake 2 years ago when I was doing Stargate Atlantis. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Stargate Atlantis. I was younger in my career, and we looked at a location that wasn't very good, but it was going to be great for production, and the producers, line producers are with me when I go to location. So I pick it, and I'm not crazy about it, but I think I'm helping out production. And then I didn't get asked back to the show because the top guy, the writer, said, "Why did you pick such a lousy location?" You know, so it's a real fine, delicate line with what you do.
Because everyone that you're working with has an agenda, and I don't say that negatively. They've got a job to do, and you know the art department wants to do the best job possible. The location guy wants to put his trailer so that no one can see them, and they're bringing you ideas, and you have to learn how to filter those ideas and use them for your benefit. And because in the bottom line is you're the one sitting in the editing room, and you're the one looking at the stuff, and you're the one who's going to take the heat for anything that's not there. And like the locations that you got sort of pushed into. If you just keep saying that mantra to yourself, because I used to be way too nice to production. I would always say, yeah, that's okay, but I'm not nice that way anymore.
Yeah, but the fine line is you have to be strong, but you can't push it over the limit too, where you alienate everybody. I think in making decisions, you have to feel everybody individually and see what kind of relationship you have with them. I've worked with some writers where they welcome me saying, this story sucks and this doesn't work and you should move this around and move this around. And then there's writers, and you don't say it that way, but you say, I think this needs a little work, and right away they dig in. This is the best script in the world. So you have to, it's all about knowing personalities. And it goes back to what I said about documentary and having to be sensitive with real people. You just need to have your tentacles up and your spiny sense of who you can trust and who you can't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question? Yes?
Just have a question about working with actors on a series, because I often find that, you know, when I see performances, I'm wondering, was this the actor's choice or was this a director choice? And how you dealt with that when you're dealing with particularly your continuing characters in a series?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Actors are they can come on set and act like they're, you know, self-assured, but they're all really scared. They're nervous, just like we all are when we do something. They want to do their best job, and they need to trust you. And I find the best way to build trust with actors is first make your set a very joyous set, full of joy. I like to laugh and have fun and be warm, and it gives a comfort zone there. And then I also think that you need to tell them what your process is. I find a lot of young directors are afraid to talk to the actors, especially if you have like a big star that you're happy to work with or something, or you think they're doing a great job, so there's nothing to tell them because they're doing a great job. You need to tell them, hey, that's a great job. I liked you did this because the subtext came out, and you need to explain that you're understanding what they're doing. You can't just stand back from them. It's the worst thing you can do. You need to engage them and invite them. But when you say, I look at a performance, I wonder if it's the director or the actor, you can never define it. It's magic and how it got there. Sometimes an actor is just self-directed and you can't change them no matter what you try. And they're great. Or sometimes they're terrible and you can't change them no matter what you try. And then sometimes you can say the little thing, if you understand the grammar of film language of acting, you can say the littlest things and it will turn them right around. The most important thing, I think, is never talk to an actor in results. You need to not say, oh, you're happy. You need to tell them what causes that happiness, and then they'll bring that happiness.
Yes?
Hello. It's very exciting to hear you both today. I'm absolutely a huge fan of the work that you both did on Mary Kills People. Unbelievably beautiful. I have a question, just to follow up on what you were mentioning there about having joy on your set. I'm wondering how you find a balance between having joy on the set, but also setting a quiet or a sensitive or respectful tone for serious and emotional scenes.
I think I'm the same on my set. I think people like me on set, and that's important to me because I think you get the best work from people if they want to work with you. I won't say for you, with you, and keep, even people who bring me, take my drink and stuff. It's just they're all vital to what I do. So I think the joyous part, but when there's a sensitive, everyone on a crew, professional crew is very sensitized to scenes like that, and they will automatically appreciate that and give the room the quiet and everything it needs. And you have sensitive scenes where not all of the crew is allowed. It's a closed set, and only the camera people are allowed in. So people are used to that, and crews are very good at that.
And especially the AD will orchestrate and nurture that environment. And it's something, if that's what you want for a particular scene, you talk about in prep, and that will be facilitated for sure. I did a lovemaking scene in Batwoman, and there was nobody on set but myself and the script supervisor and the cameraman, and everybody was really sensitive about it. Nobody was looking at monitors. And like you said, it's sort of an understood thing on a film set.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I have a question about the evolving role of the television director with regards to the showrunner, and as they take more and more control over the vision of your work. Do you find yourself more attracted to going back to film, or do you see yourself becoming part of that future future wave of television directors that has to deal with this new sort of evolved role of the TV director under the showrunner?
Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Well, saying, would you rather move into film? I'd love to move into film. It's not that simple, to get a feature film off the ground, and in order to really do a feature film, you sort of have to do what I did in my early years, which was produce something myself so that I could direct, which I would have to now do if I wanted to do a feature film. So I don't think it's going to get better. I mean, the Directors Guild of Canada has issues with the way directors are treated now and how they're losing control. I don't know what the answer is to it. My answer to it is to try and not to work on those shows. That's my answer. I don't see it getting any better because the Writers Guild is getting more and more control.
I work mostly for the DGA at this time in my career, and the DGA is a very powerful animal, and you do have the right as a director to throw somebody off of your set. I don't know if that's the case here. Like, you can throw a writer off of your set.
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah.
Must find that out.
The thing is that if you're going to throw the writer off your set, you're not going to work again. I mean, so there's a catch-22 there. But there is a lot more control that way. To me, I find it's bad in some cases and it's not in others. I don't find it like a across-the-board thing where it's a problem. And like I said, for me personally, I have the relief, and you have the relief. You've done a lot of movies. You have the relief of doing. She's done movies for television. I do pilots, so that is a relief from it all. But I don't find. I find some shows are terrible, and some shows. And I don't go back to those shows. And some of them, they're begging you to help them with their story. So.
Yeah, the show that I'm on right now, Project Blue Book, I love doing this show because the showrunner likes my work, trusts my work, doesn't ever interfere, and the on-set producer is there and only encourages but I'm happy he's there because sometimes I'm not sure about the tone of a scene or whether this should go in one direction or another. So collaborating with him is a positive thing, it's a creative thing. So it's not always bad. Yes.
Thank you. I have a question regarding being a female director. I would like to know what that brought into your career.
That's a long story. How much time do we have?
Well,
Yeah,
it's
you wanna
interesting
hear it.
too because we've made decisions in our careers. Like I always envied Holly's career because she was doing stuff like, you know, Dexter and all that, and I had decided not to go that route because I had 2 kids and I couldn't leave and that sort of thing. So I stayed more close to home. So you have to make those. It's a brutal thing to be on set all the time. And I mean, we get a break, but the people who are working on a television series every day for 6 months, they're away for 12 hours every day, and I don't know when they see their families. So you have to make those decisions about your career, and I don't know.
I mean, for me, when I first started as a woman directing, there were maybe 5 women directing in this country. She was one of them. Ann Wheeler was another one. Gail, Harvey. There's a lot more now, and that's thanks to pro-action from people like Rita Fraticelli, who ended up making, you have to have 50% women, which is terrific. But when I first started, for me to be able to work, I did make the sacrifice of kind of throwing my life aside and went into making my life all about this fantasy world of film. And I traveled a lot because I'd get a job offered in Calgary, I'd get a job offered in Vancouver, I'd get a job offered in Montreal. So I would do that rather than stay in Toronto and do 2 jobs. So that got me on the road, and that got me on to American production, and then the snowball just continued. But the interesting thing for a woman director, over just a bit of history, is when I first, as I said, went on a set, and I'm sure it was the same for you guys, is that they would say, oh, we've never had a woman director. Or you would try and get on a show, and the producers would say, we had a woman once, it didn't work. And this is God's truth. And then there was this period where women would get opportunities, but they weren't experienced because they were starting their careers, and they would get stomped on by especially the male DPs at that time, and they would get smothered, and they would say they didn't do a good job. An interesting thing now, we go through 20 years of doing this, and there are so many wonderful men on sets, and so many of them were from single mothers who were feminists, that they just don't even understand the idea that, well, it's a woman director or a male director. We're just all human beings, and you happen to be the director. I wouldn't say it's totally easy, but it's certainly a lot easier. I made a documentary in 1988 on women directors, and there was only 2 I could get from Canada because there weren't any, and everybody was pigeonholed. They couldn't do action. Well, look at Wonder Woman. I mean, things have changed. That was the big thing. It was hard for a woman to get on an action show because, oh, well, you can't. That's too butch. It's too tough. You can't do it. But Patty changed everything, so nobody's saying that anymore. But there has been a great evolution in a positive direction, I think.
Definitely. Because I only got work because as I said, because I produced it myself. And then I got to a point where I had enough credits for stuff that I'd done myself that I got hired. The first, I can remember the first thing I got hired for was the Sheldon Kennedy story. Is Jonathan Scarf here? I saw his name on an envelope. He's not here. Anyway, he was the lead actor in the Sheldon Kennedy story, and once I did that, then I started to get hired, slowly but surely. But it wasn't easy, and I don't know. People often ask me, do you think that you were, there was a bias against you? And I don't really know. I don't know the shows I didn't get because I was a woman. But certainly action stuff,
Right.
was never asked to do any of that.
Yeah, and I found in the beginning of my career, I did a lot of shows that were, you could say, cheesy, just so I could work and direct, because those are the shows I could get on. Like I would do, you're all too young to know these shows, maybe Sue Thomas FBI, Doc. These are like really hokey shows, twice in a lifetime, but I learned my craft on those, and then I ended up doing Dexter in the Americans. I don't think, male, female, whatever, I don't think you should be fussy in the beginning when you're breaking into television, because you need to build a resume. You don't want to pigeonhole, and you want to keep changing things, but you certainly, if you get offered something that you think is not creatively beneath you, think twice about it, because it could be the opportunity that'll bring you to what you do want to do.
Yeah, and even if it's not an opportunity to do what you want to do, you're practicing your craft. Anytime you can get on a set, you should get on a set.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. So nice to see you both up there. I wanted to know if you could give an example of some of the unique choices that you made to put your creative stamp on some of the episodes you've directed.
It's hard to just kind of,
Yeah.
it's, well, I'll say that the most important relationship you have is with your director of photography, and maybe even more importantly, your operators. Because the operators, I don't know if you find that, but the operators are the key to the frame and what's going to be in it. And if you're working with fantastic operators, then you have a language together, and you do the blocking, and then you talk about how the angles and what you want, and then it comes up on the monitor, and it's better than you imagined. But the opposite can happen, which happened to me last week actually, just for various reasons, not because my operators couldn't be there that day. So I had this whole new team, and all of a sudden I was going like this every time I looked at the monitor, and I had to actually change the framing. So for me, the creativity comes through working with those guys, and they take my vision the same way I'm taking the written word into making it mine. They then take mine and actually do it, put it on the screen.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like I've certainly find that the most exciting stuff for me is when I do start at the beginning and don't walk in on a show season 1, 2, or 3. I don't know if anybody's seen Durham County, because it was made a number of years ago.
Durham County is a Canadian television series.
Yeah, it was one of the first limited series in Canada. It went for 5 seasons, and this is the first season, which was 2007. And I directed the first 4 episodes, again, block shooting them as one big movie. So it's one of the, because you asked that question, it's one of the moments of pride for me. It's a very interesting story, actually. When I first got the script, that scene was written on a mountain on the side of the water in the open. And they were having the conversation, then he murders them, and from the distance, they're being watched. And to me, it was very violent and brutal. I mean, not that this isn't, I should have warned you. But I thought, well, what can I do to sort of, as they say, Spielberg said, don't shoot the shark. So I looked at it, how can I do that? And I found, being very fussy about locations and looking for weeks and weeks, I found this nest of these trees that were all just branches, like a big web, like a spider web. And I decided to place them in there and then film so the way women are objectified, just see body parts as opposed to seeing faces, because that's all they are to him and what's happening. So you see all the body parts, and then don't shoot the shark. We don't see the murder, but we feel the brutality of the murder. And that was the evolution of, creatively, from something that was out in the open by the side of the water. So to answer your question, that's sort of one of the moments I'm proud of interpreting the script.
And that's something that you have to kind of be brave enough to do, is you read it and you have to fight for what, like I don't know if Holly did have a fight, probably not in this situation,
I didn't,
but she might have, in a different situation, had a fight on her hands about how to film that scene, because the producers might have thought of it literally, it's got to be out in the open, it says out in the open, and obviously you made an incredible creative decision, and it's probably who wants to see that, who wants to actually see that? How can I show this without exploiting those girls? Those are the kinds of decisions, and sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in creatively.
Yeah, and in the same vein, don't underestimate the desire of who you're working for and think they just want it literal. You know, you can always, you approach it in a delicate way where you say, here's an idea, just, you know, if you like it or not, but always try to excel to be beyond the script that you get, because they're usually, they usually need it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're always pitching. Okay, I'm going to pitch this. I know the scene says this, but I'm going to pitch something to you. And yeah, depending on the people, it works or it doesn't. Yes? I don't know if everyone can hear that, but the question is, how do you approach the script creatively and interpret it, and then get your creative team working with you on that?
Well, two different things. If you're actually starting from the beginning and you're creating the look, I think you need to decide what in the visual concept and tone should always service the character in the story. And so in understanding the story and what it's about, how can you do that visually? And as I said before, how coming up with the idea of water and a cool palette and a warm palette. And it's the same for anything approach that. Now, it's a little more difficult in TV series because you're approaching a script that already exists. What I do, I don't sit and watch television. I never watch television. I'd rather watch movies. But if I go to do a show, I will binge watch that show so I understand it, and I'm sure you do the same thing. Like before I did the interview to get Dexter, I watched 4 seasons of Dexter, all of it, so that when I went in for the meeting, I knew Dexter better than they knew Dexter. That's why I got the job, as well as this clip was inspiring to them too. But when you approach something that already exists, if you watch everything that's happened, then you ask yourself, how can I elevate it so that I'm not changing the recipe, I'm just making it a more tasty dish? And, you know, that's really what we have to do. What do you think?
Yes? Oh, select an act. What makes you select an actor?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, truth. To me, acting is reacting. And what's very difficult in the audition process is that the actor is reacting to somebody reading to him that isn't giving him anything to work with. At the same note, when you're casting television, which is very fast, everybody has a different approach. I really want them to come in and audition being off the page, that they know the lines, because that assures me that I'm not going to get on someone on set that can't memorize. It's kind of brutal, but it's important. When we cast Mary Kills People, we looked at hundreds of actresses, all on tape. We didn't have sessions, and then we ended up casting Caroline, who didn't audition at all. I mean, it's just ironic. And when also the process in television is you'll see 10 people for a role. You'll pick 2 or 3. You'll send it to the showrunner. They'll either pick one of those, or they might go and look at you didn't pick, and they might pick one of those. Then that goes to the network. And then the network says no or yes. So really, you might end up on set with an actor who you don't think is the right actor for the part. And it doesn't always happen at the showrunner level, but it sometimes happens a lot at the network level.
You really just get a vote in television series.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel that your vote is worthwhile. And so, like on Project Blue Book, my vote is very worthwhile. So I take the time to really watch the auditions. If it's another show, I know that they really don't care what my opinion is, so I just go through it quickly. But the other thing about auditions that it's all done by tape now. We used to sit in the room and audition. Is that an actor comes in and makes a choice? You know, they have to make a choice about the character, and the choice they're making is based on just some sides and maybe knowing a little bit of knowledge about the show. And it might have been the wrong choice.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do to help them because you're not in the room with them. You can't say, do it this way. And so they're set aside just because of that, whereas we would know that they for sure could do it differently. But they would be discarded because they made the wrong choice for that audition. Yeah, it's all very brutal, isn't it? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Have you had the opportunity
I have certainly had input. I did not do the pilot. Marco Siega did the pilot, who's a terrific director and a friend of mine, and he recommended me for the job. To tell you the truth, the reason I took the job is I just think it's a groundbreaking series. I love the fact that there's a lesbian superhero, and I grew up addicted to Batman comics, and it would have been great to have had a Batwoman. And I've been producing, like, I just came from doing Transplant for CTV in Montreal, where I produced and directed, and I produced and directed most of my pilots. So I thought, okay, well, I saw the pilot was fabulous, and I thought I would just try this as another experience. And I end up shooting a lot of scenes for the other shows, and so I'm experiencing what I've never experienced before, which is being on set a lot. Like you say, how the poor crew people that are on the set, I live on set now. But I just think it's a wonderful series, and I love Ruby Rose, and I think it's to me the best in the franchise. So.
And just to further to that, another thing that's happening now is that we end up, because of this block shooting, you're always shooting 2 episodes at once, or maybe more. It's all based on location. So if you're in this one location, and the next episode, the next block has one scene in that location, they don't want to come back to this location for one scene, so they'll ask you to direct it, or they'll bring in the director, so you've got split days, or the same thing will happen to you where you've left because your block is over, but there's a scene left to do, and someone else will direct it. So there's nothing you can do about it. You have other people directing scenes from your show. Yes?
What do we say? I can always tell it's a Canadian series versus an American series because it's, Canadian series, budget aside, it's cheap and it's not populist and et cetera. But Durham County, I always hold up as one of the first series, and I think that was, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
That you could have dropped that onto HBO and Showtime, and it would have been, nobody would have known that it was quote unquote Canadian. So I was wondering if you could talk about the differences, budget aside, of working on a Canadian series versus working on an American series, which tend to be more populist oriented. I mean, Batwoman is a giant franchise, or part of a giant franchise, so it's very, we got to get an audience and got a fan base, as opposed to some of these Canadian shows, which a lot of, again, people who aren't in the industry or friends of mine says, well, Canadian shows, they're always weird and artistic, and they're not trying to grab a big audience, and they don't appeal to me. So can you just differentiate between working on a Canadian show versus an American show, and that public perception of what makes a Canadian show versus an American show?
Sure, but we're covering a lot of things here because you're also talking about what's the difference between cable and network. Yeah. Let's start with network. I mean, network is about selling soap. It's commerce. And it shoots faster, it happens faster, and it airs faster. So when a cable show happens, literally you can do an episode of cable show and it won't be out for a year from now. Maybe a year is a little much, but like it's way down the road. So they have more time to write them and develop them, and they have more freedom. They don't have the same restrictions. Now, talking just about network, the difference between American and Canadian network, I would say the biggest difference is money. It's just obviously money. Like, for example, in Canada, if I'm on a show, a Canadian show, and I say, I'd like a crane, they'll say, I'll see. In America, if I say, I'd like a crane, they say, for how many days? I mean, it's really true. That's the difference. Yeah. I just did this wonderful show called Transplant in Montreal for CTV, but we built an entire hospital, but we had to arrange the whole shoot because we didn't have enough extras to fill the whole hospital. So we had to do all the busy days on this day so that we would have this many extras. That's not even a question in an American show. And that's an American show in America. An American show in Canada is a little closer to a Canadian show in terms of those sort of things. But I think the reason Durham looks so different is it was a wonderful team making it. Laurie, the writer, is very, very talented, and she sees the world from a different direction than anybody else. And it was really, it was a cable show before cable shows were really chic and what everybody was watching. And I think it was a bit ahead of its time, actually, in this country. I mean, it was still not doing that sort of thing. But again, I think it's just in the writing. There's more freedom with cable writing.
And, you know, the other thing that's happening in Canada, we've lost all our support for drama, really. So most people do work on American stuff. It's very, very hard for Canadian producers to
Yeah.
get shows on the ground, off the ground. It's just, the money's just not there. CBC gets their money cut all the time. There's just not there, and so everything has to be a co-production, and Americans aren't really interested in co-producing Canadian stories. So it is very I admire anyone. I admire the Cameron sisters for the work they do on they did Mary Kills People, and Adrian Mitchell, and for Durham County, and now she's doing Coroner. I just admire all of them.
And one thing in Canada I find is there's an elite group both in feature film and television that seem to get to do things over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that they're not great. I mean, Tassie and Amy are fabulous. Adrian Janis, fabulous. The thing is, though, that we just don't have the money to take chances on you coming in with a new idea. You know, what was special about Mary Kills People is, I don't know if anyone here knows Tara Armstrong. She's from Vancouver. And she was like a baby writer just beginning her career and had this crazy idea and wrote it. And it got into the hands of E1, and then it got in the hands of Chorus, and everybody just fell in love with the first script, and it got made. But that is so few and far between. And even then, they brought Tassie and Amy on to nurture the whole thing.
Any more questions? Yes, right here.
When choosing to do a project, is it purely the story and the script that really grabs you, or do the other key creatives who are attached to the project really hold weight in whether you want to be a part of it or not?
Want to answer that?
Well, first of all, when you're a director hire on an episodic, it's like roulette. You don't know if you're going to get the good script or the stinker. You may get the showrunner script, and it's going to be fabulous, and they're going to give you 4 extra days because of the showrunner script, or you're going to get the person who's been in the back room paginating the scripts, and they're getting their break, and you don't know what you're going to get.
Or you might get a bottle episode because they've spent all their money at the beginning, and then they're saving money for the end. So
Exactly.
right now we need to save a lot of money, and we'll just have everyone stay in one room.
But to answer the other part of your question, I have turned down shows when I know who this DP is or who this actor is, because I've had experiences where it's just, life's too short. So yeah, creatively, I do like to look at the team before I say yes to a show, if that's possible, if it's not a brand new show and everybody hasn't been hired yet, because there are some nasty people out there that you just don't want to work with.
Hi. I'd like if you could talk a little bit about your climb to the chair, to the director's chair, because you talk about producing so that you can direct, but as a writer-director, that just seems like a lot of balls to juggle, writing, directing, producing, just so you can facilitate your own work. Not that it's not undoable, but I'd like to know a little bit about how you rose to status, so where you got your first, X marks the spot, I'm here, I'm a director, and how much prep or work on other things, producing, writing, you had to do to climb to get there.
You go ahead.
I know it's a
Oh, I feel so old. Well, I started producing, and my dear friend Laura Mazer here, who's a wonderful editor, she edited all my first films in Winnipeg. But so I did two. I adapted 2 of David Adams Richards' books. I developed Daughters of the Country. All of that so that I could work. The first series I ever did was a half-hour called My Life as a Dog, which was produced in Winnipeg, and I had to fight my way onto that. Because they were getting a lot of Manitoba money, and I sort of forced the issue. I said, you're bringing everyone in from outside, and I forced them to allow me to direct. So that's one of the things that I did. And getting an agent, that's part of it, is getting an agent to get you out there into the world. But really, it was just a matter of just inching my way up and get the more credit. And now it's even harder. Even with all of our experience, we still will be interviewed for shows. that, you know, because they want to know if you're the right fit for their show. So it's not like we just sit back and get offered. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe she does. She probably does. But, you know, if there's a show that I'm very interested in and it's one of the better shows, I'll have to be interviewed for those reasons. So, but, you know, it's been a slow thing, and I have made choices, as I said, along the way to not go to L.A. and live in L.A. because I couldn't. So, yeah, I mean, I can't complain. It's been pretty good.
It's interesting what you say about agents, because I really do believe that an agent can make or break your career. I spent my first few years with different agents, and they were doing nothing. And then one day, I won't name the agent because she did nothing, but she was in LA, and I did this CBC movie called Dangerous Offender, and she left, in those days, a cassette of it. You know what a cassette is here? A cassette on the desk of this other agent in LA, and he saw it, and he called me, and he said, "I'm going to blah, 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 blah," typical Hollywood, and I'm, yeah, Hollywood, yeah. And this guy changed my career. And I went with him, and I've been with him, gosh, now 20 years maybe. And like I said, I do 10 shows a year. If I'm not doing a show, I'm doing a pilot, I'm doing something. He's now a manager, and I have another agent, so I have a team that's taking 20% of my paycheck. But I don't mind because I'm getting a paycheck as opposed to no paycheck. But it's really hard to get an agent, and it's hard to get a good agent, and that's going to be one of your biggest struggles.
Yeah, I had the same issue. I had bad agents until I now have a good agent, which really turned my career around too, because, well, my example of that was I had done a movie here called The Pastor's Wife, and it just was one of those things where it was with Rose McGowan and Michael Shanks, and everything kind of came together. It was beautifully shot by Kim Miles, and I loved my producer, Jerry, sorry, I can't remember his name, but anyway, he loved it so much. Oh, J.J. Abrams' father, that's who it was, Jerry Abrams. So J.J. had this special screening because his father loved the movie so much. So I went to L.A., big deal, you know, there were all kinds of important people at this screening, and my agent came with me, and I never had one meeting while I was there. It was unbelievable. That's when I fired him and got my current agent. And, you know, your agent is really a big part of your life, and it has to be someone you trust, and it has to be someone you can talk to, and someone you can, it's like a chessboard. If, like she said, if I can get you on this, then I can get you on this, and then if I can get you on this, then I can get you on this. And that's exactly what's happened. She slowly, you know, so that's a big part of sort of making your way up the chain.
And a sidebar to that, yes, I've worked on huge network shows and cable shows in America, but I spent literally almost 10 years going down there every year, just before pilot season, just before the upfronts, or just after the upfronts, and taking interviews. And I took interviews forever. And I started taking them where I really didn't have the qualifications, but they do see everybody because they don't know who you're going to be or will be. And I just did that over and over till eventually maybe seeing somebody on year 8 decides, oh, I'm going to recommend you. And you also have to, there you have to be approved by the networks, but they can't get you hired. You get hired by the showrunners, but you got to be approved by the networks because they'll refuse you. So I spent all this time going to meet all the networks, and so that when I started to get the credits to go with the showrunners, and they suggested me, they went, "Oh, we know her," and you know it works that way. But there is a lot of footwork.
Yeah, I've been kicking and screaming to do that every year. I loathe doing it.
Yeah, I loathe it too.
Yeah. Because, you know, you go down there, you never leave an office there not feeling that you're the best director in the world. That's just what...
Oh, yeah, they love you.
Yeah.
They love you.
Yeah. And then nothing happens, but you feel good for a little bit. Any more? Yes, there's a question.
I'm just wondering what the opportunities are or influence is with these new platforms like Netflix. That these are, you know, U.S. based, but Netflix and the Disney, and I mean, are those things that you're able to get work in as a director? Is this something that's encouraging?
You're doing Netflix right now, aren't you? Is it
No,
Netflix?
I just did a Netflix. I'm
Right.
doing History Channel right now.
History Channel. Yeah, absolutely. And I find, I mean, there's two levels on all those networks. Like take Netflix, for example. They do a lot of really great stuff we all know about, and they do a lot of trashy stuff. And the trashy stuff, a lot of it gets made up here because it's cheaper. It kind of goes hand in hand. So there's been a lot of Netflix stuff up here that I've turned down for that reason. But then I had a wonderful opportunity to do Etopia, which is this new series at Amazon that's going to be huge, but I had committed to this. And that's sort of, my life story has been unlike yourself, where you sit back now and choose. I'm always booking myself and then losing opportunity because I've booked myself. But yes, those opportunities are there for us for sure, as much as anything else.
And there's just so much, like, there's just tons of stuff being made.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great time to get into the industry, because I can't see it ending anytime soon.
Network, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you.
There's 3 at the back there.
Backtracking to that agent aspect quickly, you've both experienced very poor agents in your life. Have you noticed any characteristics that we should just avoid directly before even, so that we can skip all these years of having bad agents?
Well, I would say do your homework. You know, talk to people who they represent. Have meetings with them. Make sure that, ask them what they're going to do for you, because you kind of go in thinking, oh, this person's, you know, I wonder if they'll take me on as a client, was my first, my attitude at the beginning. But it's a business partner, and you have to know that you have to, set up some questions for them. How are you going to get my career launched? What are you going to do for me? What is your approach to what because you will have a certain amount of experience. What can they use? What can they take from that and run with? So you need to be really selective. You need to do your homework.
I think what Norma said about her agent, said, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. They need to give you their strategy and what they think they can do for you, and if they honestly think they can. If they're not returning your calls and they get back to you the next day, they're not the person for you. You need somebody that, no matter how busy they are, they're passionate for you. And you also have to keep telling them, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. You got to let them know who you are and what you want to do. So that if you read in the Hollywood Reporter a new show's out or something, you send it to your agent and say, I think I'd be good for this, and just keep pushing them and to do things for you. And if they're responsive, it's great, and if they're not, then that's a big clue.
Yeah, because the last bad agent I had, I would send him a note saying, I've heard about this show, and he'd say, oh, yes, I've put your name forward for that, meaning they don't want me. Or he wouldn't know about the show. Whereas this agent I've got now, it's like, oh, please, do I have to do that? It's like... But interestingly enough, I almost didn't get that agent because I was coming, she's from here, and I was coming here to do a show, and we'd been talking, we'd been, back and forth a bit, because I was looking for a new agent, and she was interested in me. So she said, and then I decided, okay, I think I will go with you, and I'll come and see you in person when I'm in Vancouver. So, and we'll tie the knot. So the week before, I was sending her messages, and she wasn't, like you say, she wasn't returning my emails. And I thought, okay, this is not the agent for me. She's not returning my emails. So I went to her office to divorce her before marrying her. And I said, I'm sorry, I've decided not to go ahead with this. And she said, well, why don't you sit down and we'll talk. Anyway, we talked for a while, and then it came out. And I said, well, you haven't returned my emails in the last week. She said, I never got any emails from you. Well, I had been working with, my agent's first name is Carmen, her last name is Bonici, and I was working at the time with a wardrobe woman whose name was Carmen. I'm sure some of you know her, I can't say her last name, but she came up first in the email, so she was getting all my emails. So I almost didn't have this agent.
That changed your life.
That changed my life. Anyway.
Good you went to divorce and didn't just not return
Yeah,
her
it's
emails.
good, yeah.
Yes? Oh, I love them.
Like a one take, like just.
I just
I
did
love
a big.
them.
I just did a big oneer. They're-
I did. I did a number of Steven Spielberg shows, and the wonderful thing about doing Steven Spielberg shows is he encourages creativity. One of the things he encourages is oneers. I did a Falling Skies episode where I did an entire act as a oneer. We rehearsed it for like 5 hours, and then boom, we did it. And we did a second take, and it wasn't as good as first, so we went with the first. But I mean, you probably have seen on YouTube Steven Spielberg's oneers. Have you seen that? You should Google it. It's amazing. It's like there's like 15 of his oneers. But to me, that is so creative because the camera is always dancing with the character and should inform the character. And when you do a oneer, you get to tell the whole story as a dance.
But you know, oneers can be a trap too because it's great to do a oneer, but you have to do a oneer for the right reason, and you always have to be informing it's about the drama. It's not about a groovy shot because I've certainly made that mistake. Where a cinematographer, DOP has convinced me to, describe this groovy shot. So I've done the groovy shot, but I missed the point of the scene. So.
Yeah, and on that note, if you are going to do a oneer, you want to make sure who you're doing it for is on board, if you want to come back. Like I said, Spielberg's very encouraging about it. But for example, I did a oneer on a Dick Wolf show, and I asked, and they said, sure, but make sure you get coverage. And I did get coverage, and they used the oneer except for one little pop, which was great. But you're right. You do need to have it has to work dramatically to do it. And if it works dramatically, it's often better than just doing coverage. Mm-hmm. Yes?
I have a question for you, Bailey. I'm not. You studied architecture, am I right? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So can I ask you what impact did architecture had in your filmmaking career?
Well, architecture is all about design and form and visual. So it informs me all the time. It's just, I think, the way you see things. So I'm sure it's there somewhere. I'm a visual person, so that's why I went into architecture in the first place, and I find that film is the same. You were talking about locations. Locations are, when you look at a location, I always look at it in terms of how it can visually integrate into the show that I'm doing. So it's a visual medium the same way as architecture is.
This has just been such an incredible pleasure, and I would just like to ask the audience to join me again in showing our appreciation for these two brilliant filmmakers.